Welcome back, everyone, and I now welcome officials from the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. Do you wish to make an opening statement, Ms Spence?
Pip Spence, CEO, CASA. I've got one prepared, but I'm happy just to table it in the interest of time.
I think in the interest of time, Senator Canavan, happy for tabling? Yes, thanks. So we can get straight to questions. Thank you, Ms Spence. And I'll pass to you, Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Chair. I just had some questions on an ANAO audit. I understand the Australian National Audit Office undertook a review of CASA's planning and conduct of surveillance activities.
Yes, that's correct.
That's right. My understanding is that the audit found a lack of consistency in the application of surveillance across sectors, with delays in identifying key areas of focus for surveillance. Could you advise us what the nature of those issues were and the key findings made and how you responded to those findings?
What I can say is overall, I think they found that we were effective, but they did identify areas where we could improve our performance. And I might ask my head of the Regulatory Oversight Division if you want to provide a bit more detail. Mr. Walker.
No, thanks, Pip. Rob Walker, Executive Manager of the Regulatory Oversight Division. The inquiry obviously made a number of recommendations which CASA has agreed with each of those. In terms of the range and scope of the recommendations, it covers off effectively a lot of the way we're actually capturing our records and articulating our processes. So we've agreed that in terms of our national operating plan that we're going to better articulate that so that's clearly understood by industry. And some of the other recommendations also go to our reporting, so how we actually capture the surveillance activity that we've performed and how that's reported through to both our board and through to the Minister as well.
So these, the lack of consistency across, and what does surveillance mean exactly, to help me out? What does that mean? When you're doing a surveillance activity, what do you do?
Yes, certainly, Senator. We have an annual program of surveillance. So surveillance is effectively oversight. We go out and we look at various operators or various sectors with industry to understand how they're performing. Obviously, they've given a regulatory permission from us to operate, be it an air operator certificate or some sort of other permission, and it's effectively a validation process to go and check that they're doing what they said they were going to do.
Okay.
But fundamentally, are they operating safely?
So even though the review found that there was a lack of consistency in the application of surveillance, there was no impact on safety standards in your view or ANAO's view?
No, both are of the view from organisationally, no impact on safety standards, and I'm confident the ANAO were of that view as well. In regularising our surveillance, we do it in a number of ways. We describe them as the pillars of surveillance. We have scheduled surveillance, which is obviously programmed in. We also do response surveillance, which might be in reaction to an event or an accident or some sort of incident. And then we also do campaign surveillance, where we actually go out and target a particular sector to actually understand how it's operating. As an example, we've recently done a campaign surveillance with a return to service from COVID to make sure that all the operators, airlines particularly, are meeting their regulatory obligations and continuing safe operations.
Okay. All right. Just on a similar theme, there's been a lot of supply chain issues associated, I suppose, during COVID and also the recovery to COVID. Are there any particular issues sourcing replacement parts, other issues for the aviation sector at the moment?
Certainly, Senator, we're aware that there are a number of challenges, supply chain challenges for operators in Australia. And that is right across the board, not just with major airlines, but also with some of the smaller charter operators. Some of the larger engine manufacturers, both in Europe and the US, are struggling to maintain supply, and we are seeing some of those impacting here in Australia. Our reaction to it as the regulators, we're in close contact with those operators. We have very good relationships, and we've got a standing offer with industry where they've identified they might have a challenge to come and talk to us. and in a number of instances we have actually provided some forms of relief to allow them to continue to operate until they get the spare parts they need.
And when you provide that relief, again, you're presumably not in any way compromising safety. How do you make these judgments, though?
Certainly. We very much rely on what we refer to as the original equipment manufacturer, so the OEM, and the OEM is obviously the organisation that designs and manufactures those parts. So it could be one of the larger engine shops or it could be a smaller parts supplier. As the original designer, we very much look at what their advice is, and if they are the advice from the manufacturer that's okay to grant some sort of relief or an exemption in a short-term period, then we take that on board. We also do our own due diligence and safety analysis as well.
And are you seeing supply chain issues begin to ease, or are they really still there at the moment in this sector?
Across different sectors, it's very much starting to ease in some of the larger manufacturers with Airbus and Boeing. Right. In the smaller sectors, there's still some challenges that it's starting to ameliorate, but we'd expect that some of thinking of Lycoming in particular that supply engines for helicopters as well as light aircraft they're probably still 6 months away from getting back to normal.
Okay. Just turning to another issue, a few of us in regional areas are excited for this new airline Bonza. So you're probably familiar with it to start, because we're getting smashed with high airfares, and I know that's not your responsibility, but that's a big issue at the moment in country areas in particular, and it'd be great to have some more competition. I see though there's been a delay in getting, I think, CASA approval. Could you take us through the status of that?
Senator, it's a pretty complex process to work through for a new airline to come in and actually be granted an air operator's certificate.
Yep.
We've been working very closely with Bonza. We're still waiting for some material back from them, but there are a lot of steps that they actually have to get through to actually be able to operate in Australia. But I think it's a very they're being very diligent in the way in which they're working with us. But again, from a safety point of view, we need to make sure that they've got all the right things in place.
I think on a positive note, we are very close.
Okay.
A number of the required approvals have been granted. They currently have one aircraft in Australia which they've been using for some of their proving flights.
Right.
Another 2 aircraft are on the way, and when we're in receipt of the additional manuals that we require, we should be able to continue to work as expeditiously as we have to get them up and running.
But it won't be a Christmas present by the sound of it for us?
I wouldn't want to be drawn on a date, but it's going to be close.
Okay, all right. Now, I've got one more series of questions, but I'll just maybe pause to check.
You keep going, but I'll get an indication.
Is there others that want to...
Well, I know Senator Wishford's got
mindful of
questions in
time.
AMSA. Senator Roberts, have you got questions to CASA? Or if
CASA.
you're happy...
Maybe I'll just rotate the call because we do want to leave time
Sure.
for other agencies, and I'll come back at this time.
Great. Senator Roberts.
Do you have CASA? There you go. Do you have CASA?
Thank you for appearing here today.
Yes, did that.
Is it CASA that is responsible for aeromedical safety for pilots in Australia?
Yes, Senator.
Can you tell me a bit more about the responsibility?
I might invite my colleague who looks after the AVMED area within CASA to provide you a bit more information about how we operate in that space.
Which area was that, Ms Spence?
It's the Stakeholder Engagement Division, but he's responsible for our aviation medicine team within CASA.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Marcella, the Executive Manager for the Stakeholder Engagement Division, and the aviation medicine sits within that portfolio.
And what are your responsibilities?
So I look after the area that runs our medical certification area.
Certification of pilots?
Oh, for aviation medicine, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we run a certification process where anyone that wants to be granted a pilot licence needs to meet a medical standard, and depending on the level of licence they'd like to hold, there are different medical standards that they can apply for, and some of those range from being granted effectively by a GP all the way up to CASA doing robust assessments.
Okay. Second question, how do you pronounce your second name, Mr?
Marcello.
Marcello.
Yeah,
thank you. Did the airlines have to consult CASA at all before implementing vaccine mandates?
Senator, they would not have known. The vaccine mandates were a matter for health agencies, not us.
So, but CASA is responsible for aeromedical safety. And this is mandating, the airlines were mandating a medical procedure. Mandating.
No, Senator, our policy when it comes to vaccination from an aviation safety perspective is fairly straightforward. We have a 24-hour stand-down period where we request that crews don't operate for 24 hours, and that accounts for any adverse reactions that might happen on any vaccination. And beyond that, our requirement is that if there are effects being experienced, that pilots declare that either to us or to their medical examiner and stand down from duties. So it's a pretty standard process we have for vaccinations.
So you'd expect the effects to be over within 24 hours?
The immediate effects, so our concern is around incapacitation. So is there a risk of sudden incapacitation for a pilot? And the medical evidence suggests that takes place in the first 24 hours following.
Where did the evidence come from?
Senator, that's a globally accepted standard that all
So you didn't check
regulators...
where the evidence came from, you just accepted the globally accepted...
Senator, and as Mr Marcellia said, this is for all vaccinations, and that is a long-standing practice that has been in place around that 24 hours. So there was no... What we're talking about is our general processes.
Okay, so there's nothing exceptional about the way COVID injections are treated?
No, Senator.
Okay, thank you. So is CASA aware that the COVID injections only hold provisional approval?
Senator, we take the advice from the health authorities that have approved those vaccinations for use in Australia, and as far as we're concerned, we don't question that. We don't second guess that. That's a.
No, I wasn't asking that question, Mr. Marcella. I was asking if you're aware that the COVID injections only have provisional approval, not approval.
We are aware that the vaccines are approved for use in Australia, and that's what matters to us.
Provisionally approved. You're not aware that they were provisionally approved?
Look, I am aware that they are provisionally
thank
approved.
you.
Yeah.
Are you aware that the provisional approval means the health regulators only have preliminary data on the medication and are awaiting on the full suite of data from pharmaceutical companies from further monitoring, which could include risks and harms not identified in the preliminary data? Are you aware of that?
No, Senator, as I said, from our perspective, they have been approved by health authorities for use in Australia. That's the extent of our concern.
Given what I just said and the uncertainty there, is there a possibility that vaccine mandates inject a level of risk onto pilots flying our planes? Is there a level of uncertainty introduced?
Senator, we're following, as Mr Marcellia said, we're following the medical advice, and we have not got any reason to have concerns around the impact of COVID vaccinations in Australia.
So who gave you the medical advice?
We're following the announced medical advice that comes from the...
So who gave you that announced medical advice?
Senator, we're following the advice that's provided to across the country. We hear what the CMOs are saying.
Chief Medical Officer, APRA, Health, the Federal Secretary.
We're following
Secretary
the published advice.
Who published it?
Oh, Senator, I'm sorry, I don't know who.
You didn't check?
Senator, we're following the advice that's out there, and I think there's a level of... we're treating the COVID vaccinations the same way we do with every other vaccination in the country.
Okay, thank you for acknowledging that. Does CASA collect reports of COVID-19 vaccine effects, side effects and adverse events in and Class 1 to 3 medical certificate holders, and how is this data collected?
So, Senator, medical certificate holders are required to see their medical examiners on a regular basis. We do expect them to disclose effects if they've had them. We have nothing in any of the data that we hold that indicates any adverse effects from COVID vaccination.
Okay. You have nothing in the data?
Nothing.
But you don't go and specifically collect it?
Yes, we do. It is required to be provided to us, but nothing has been provided to us.
Who do you require to provide it?
The pilots.
The pilots, okay. Do you believe that there may be a perverse incentive for a pilot to not report if they have suffered an adverse event? If they report an event, they are putting their financial livelihood at risk?
No, Senator.
You don't?
No, Senator.
Okay. How does CASA detect pilots who may have a medical problem if they have not self-reported it to CASA?
Can you repeat the question, sorry, Senator?
How does CASA detect pilots who may have a medical problem if they have not self-reported it to CASA?
So, Senator, as I said earlier, medical certificate holders are required to see an examiner on a frequent basis. It depends on their age, depends on the class of medical. So in order to hold a medical certificate for most classes of medicals, you need to see a medical examiner. on a frequent basis. So other than self-declaration, that's the other control that we have in our medical
Yeah, we've got a
system.
few.
Yeah.
Three agencies.
Are you,
No,
are you aware, thanks for the endorsement, that means a lot. Are you aware that the COVID injections were not fully tested, barely partially tested? Are you aware? Yes or no?
Senator, it's not a matter for us. We are an aviation safety agency.
Exactly.
We take the advice when it comes to vaccination from the authorities that are charged with making those decisions.
Are you aware, now I haven't checked this myself, but I'm told by a lawyer in America that 1,000 Southwest airline pilots cannot pass their medical after being injected? That's a hell of a lot of pilots in America just with one airline.
Senator, we haven't heard that data
Okay.
being provided to us.
Are you aware that the Pfizer trials were sloppy, unscientific and shut down early, apparently due to deaths? Are you aware?
Senator, I don't think there's anything else that we can really add to the line of questioning.
Sorry, Ms. Spence, Senator Robertson, much as I really enjoy working with you, but I really think that the officers cannot answer your line of questioning here.
No, that's become clear.
And I would please urge Senator Roberts that we are so tight for time. If there are any more, would you put them on notice?
I'll hand back
Thank
to
you.
Chair, I've just got one follow-up, and there's one other line of
Doug.
questions that won't be long. Just quickly, do you require any employees of CASA to take a vaccine? Or?
We didn't.
You didn't have any mandates?
We didn't mandate it, but there were some areas where, because of the requirements of the industry that we operate with,
okay,
where
but it wasn't imposed
but
by
we
CASA.
did not have
And
any
there's no
mandate.
requirements for pilots for their registration, do they?
that was a matter for the airlines.
Yes, okay,
Yeah.
but not imposed by CASA
No.
itself.
No, Senator.
Okay, I've just got.
Senator Rennick does have some, but
I was just going to check that. Did you have follow-ups on this? I'm going to other topics.
Take you up on where you follow the medical advice, and I'll just give you some feedback that I think you should be aware of. First of all, ATAGI is on the record as providing misleading health advice. They have stated that the vaccine reduces transmission when the FDA in the States and Pfizer have both said that they have no evidence that the vaccine stopped transmission, number one. Professor Skerritt in his very room has told me that the lipid in the vaccine was the same as the lipid that you might eat in a steak or sausage for breakfast. That was in the last set of estimates. He subsequently told me...
Yes, you can. I'm sorry, Senator Rennick. I'm sorry. Senator Bush-Wilson, yes.
This is an opportunity to ask questions. Have you got a question, Senator?
Yeah, I have. Yes, I'm just stating my preamble.
We don't have a lot of time. We've got 40 minutes to get through three
Yeah,
agencies.
okay. So I've been sitting here all morning waiting for my turn, so that's the way it works, Senator Bush-Wilson. Subsequently, he's told me in this set of estimates that there's actually 4 different sets of lipids, so he's given me misleading information there. And Professor Murphy, who was CMO at the time the vaccine was approved, didn't actually read the Pfizer non-clinical report. He admitted to me in this set of estimates that he never even read it. So my question to you is, what steps do you undertake, given that, you know, if one person has an event, that's bad enough, but if a pilot has an event in a plane, that's obviously going to be catastrophic. Do you undertake to ensure that our health authorities, who the TGA, their regulatory captured over 95% of their fees come from Big Pharma, are actually being accurate?
Oh, Senator, all I can say is we have no one else to follow other than the medical authorities, and we have systems in place, as Mr Marcelli has run through, which would, if there is a systemic issue being experienced in industry, our data would capture that and we would act in response to those systemic issues. But we have not had any we haven't even had any individual reports of an impact of a COVID vaccination.
Okay. So do you have any independent doctors who aren't tied to a TARGI or the TGA that actually review the vaccine data yourself?
Not the vaccine data, no, Senator.
Right, thank you. That's all I need to know.
Senator Canavan.
Very quickly. I just wanted to highlight that there's been 2 days this year that flights haven't been able to land at Mount Isa because of 1,900-foot cloud cover, cloud floor, I should say. Are you aware of other regional centres that have had not been able to land aircraft because of fog?
No, Senator, but that might be more one for Air Services Australia than us.
All right. And then finally, again, you might refer me there, but one thing, I thought we were investing significantly in the GPS positioning system through the SBS program that would allow landing at regional airports that do not have aircraft towers at a lower level of
Yeah, I think-
flood of cloud cover. What's happening there?
I think, Senator, that'd be either Air Services, and I think the SBAS program is actually Geoscience Australia.
Yes, it is,
responsible.
but it was going to have this benefit. And obviously, that would come from
Yeah.
the regulations of airports. Okay, we'll go to Air Services. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Canavan. Ms Spencer, to the officers, thank you very much. We'll now call Air Services Australia.